Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the PGA One Guild Women's Impact Network, I'd like to welcome you to the fourth session in the Equity in Our Industry series. In this six-part series, we begin our discussions with how we can make meaningful change toward equity in our industry. We've tackled writing and development, casting, and crewing up. And this evening, we are talking money, all about the financing, all about the Benjamins. Specifically, this evening's panel will discuss the financing landscape for projects with cast featuring Black, Indigenous, people of color leads with BIPOC content, best practices on securing financing, and some of the obstacles and challenges with casting. My name is Denise Henricks. I'm one of the Women's Impact Network co-leads here in Atlanta, and I will be your moderator this evening. First, I'd like to introduce our panel. I'm going to start with Mr. Rob Williams, who is the Senior Vice President of Theatrical Motion Pictures for JuVee Productions. Rob brings more than 2 decades of high-profile experience to the process of production, storytelling, and the business of entertainment. Prior to joining JuVee as a SVP of film, Williams had a decade of experience as an independent producer, where he was involved with several film and TV projects, including the development and production of Will Smith's Ali, The Aviator, which starred Leonardo DiCaprio, and previous to that, Williams was at Amblin Entertainment, where he worked on such films as Amistad, Ants, and Deep Impact. He currently oversees all aspects of JuVee's robust slate of feature film projects and also acts as a point of contact for their first look deal with Amazon Studios. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you.
Next, I want to welcome Minette Louie, who is an Emmy-nominated, multiple Spirit award-winning producer whose company, The Population, with Molly Asher and Derek Nguyen, recently signed a first look deal with Topic Studios. Mynette is on the board of directors for Film Independent and serves as an advisor to Sundance, South by Southwest, Tribeca, and IFP. She was recently named as one of Business Insider's 12 movie producers at the top of their game to watch in 2020 and beyond, and IndieWire's 100 filmmakers to follow on Twitter. And I do follow her on Twitter. She's a New Yorker also. Welcome, Mynette.
Thank you, Denise. Thanks, everyone.
And welcome Allison Hironaka. Allison is an agent in the media finance department with CAA. She is based in LA and has worked on the financing and sales of many critically acclaimed and commercially successful independent finance films. She began her career at Paradigm Talent Agency and joined CAA in 2014. Welcome to all of our panelists, Allison, Rob, and Mynette. So I want to jump right into it, and let's just go ahead and start talking about some of the obstacles that BIPOC face when it comes to securing financing, getting finance, or even starting to look at it. Anybody can start. Talk about some of the obstacles and challenges, and from a historical perspective. Let's start with that.
Should I jump in here?
Sure, we can start with you, Rob.
I generally think that there's 2 pillars that directly affect the ability to get a production financed in this space. Not one of them doesn't have to do directly with the industry, but what I've noticed over the years is that it limits the capacity of anyone to get financing. And that really comes down to wealth inequality, because what you find is you don't have a huge pool of people who relate to the content to say, I'll give you 5 million because I have it, right? So that ends up playing a direct relationship in limiting the pool of investors that you can go to. The other part of it, which I hope that we're steering away from, I sense that there are some people, especially because of the influx of streamers that use analytics to determine who's popular and who's not. the foreign sales model has not been a friend to, and I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone, but it is not the friend to this type of content. Primarily, I believe, is because the work has not been done to determine what territories are interesting to what people, to what audiences. It's been seen through historically a singular lens, but hopefully now that people are using digital analytics, we can get to identifying territories. Because, you know, I know in regards to Viola, we've had to do some of our own footwork to learn, okay, Italy is really huge. You know, Spain is really huge for her. Brazil is off the chain. So we have to look at these various territories to see where the popularity is, so that when we're having those foreign sales conversations, we can bring up these issues. But I think, you know, having a larger pool of investors and understanding territories that are attractive to various audiences around the world, not just domestically, are two issues and areas that we really could pay attention to, maybe to find more options.
Yeah, and I would say even further to both points, from a really, really early stage, when you want to go and create your first project, a lot of that comes from, you know, what have you done before, right? And someone who can afford to finance their own short has a short to show. And now you have a proof of concept, and now it's so much easier to walk in and pitch it. And I think that your comment on that wealth inequality from the beginning, Rob, is really important, because there's a huge difference between somebody who, you know, went to a high-end film school and was able to finance a $25,000 or $40,000 graduate thesis and is able to step in with this, you know, proof of what they can do. It proves that they could do something amazing, and I don't mean to take away from that at all. But there may be someone else who didn't get the opportunity to create that sort of, you know, maybe they've made their thesis for $5,000, because even that was a stretch, right? And that really does create a gap. And I don't, you know, there's a lot of different ways that we can work to try to fix that. But I think that's, from a very, very first breaking in point, a real problem. Or, you know, do you have enough time to spend your time writing 8 scripts? Or did you do one while you were working 2 different jobs and going to school? I don't know.
Yeah, it's the wealthy leisure class that can afford to do this hobby as a job, you know. And you know, I think the dirty little secret, especially with an independent film, at least, you know, first features are primarily financed by friends and family. And if you have rich friends and family, it's really helpful. So, but I will also say that, you know, I think just to highlight, you know, there's a lot of in-group bias as well. You know, when I walk into a room and it's all a bunch of white dudes, it's like, I have to prove myself. I have to earn my respect to this day, you know. It's like, you know, a room full of agents or, you know, financiers who don't look like me. And it's sort of like, you have to learn how to speak their language. And it's so culture is a big part of it. And just learning how to speak their language, learning how to like earn their respect. But, you know, my last 2 projects were financed, were greenlit by people at studios who basically, I had a film called I Carry You With Me that's going to come out May 21st. And that was a Sony worldwide film, and it was greenlit and championed by this guy, Alex Zahn, who's part Mexican. It's a Mexican film, Spanish language. And so he really pushed it. If it weren't for him, we would never have gotten that movie made. And similarly, I have a TV series that I set up recently, and it's got an Asian American cast, and the person who greenlit it was Asian American. So, you know, having people BIPOC in positions of green light power obviously helps.
So that, just piggybacking off what you said, and do you think things now, and this is for all of you, are shifting, are changing, you know, with an awareness of, you know, putting a spotlight on, you know, we need to have more BIPOC films produced by them, where, you know, where is this money coming from? So do you think things are shifting now, or are those, you know, the challenges still exist? Or do you see a big shift happening now with everything going on?
Sorry, Rob, do you want to jump in? I just, I think there's two answers, and the answers are yes and no, right? Like it's happening in a really major way, certainly in terms of creative ideas that are being put forth. Like Mynette alluded to, a changing face of what you see at studios and amongst decision makers. And I think that that's, it's important, and it's pushing the conversation forward, and it's allowing for greater change to happen. But I also think that, speaking specifically about independent financing in this panel, I think there's a much longer sort of trickle down effect that we haven't seen fully happen yet, and that hopefully will start to happen, but may take a little bit longer, or we may have to do more active work to start to see that happen, like Rob said, in various territories, and amongst independent financiers who have not traditionally spent their money in this world.
I mean, I'll jump in here too. I think it's slowly changing. I do think that like financiers and studios often react to public pressure. And in fact, like there was a project I was pitching this summer that, some buyer, it got set up, but a bunch of buyers passed on it. And then because of some recent events in the zeitgeist, they came back around and were like, hey, whatever happened with that project? So it's sort of, the studios are very responsive to the zeitgeist and public pressure and what's happening, So I think that some of that is affecting what they're greenlighting, the Black Lives Matter movement, that stuff is having some influence, but the change is slow. I mean, if you look at like, especially like, at the lower budgets, I think it's getting better. I think, but as the budgets get higher, it gets whiter and more male, it's still that way. And so I think it's going to take a while to sort of shift that.
Yeah, and I think that we could use more diverse ideas of what makes a good film, primarily because what I fear is that we're looking at the same images repeated in different stories, as opposed to expanding the dynamics of what different cultures are, and not just one sort of monolithic sort of view. Because certain stories, if it's very familiar, or if it feels like it's in the news, it can get a green light. But when you bring in characters that are more layered and complicated and have an own sense of agency, it takes more selling to get those to be understood as to what is the story, right? So I think that it's going to require the ability to remove yourself from the story and allow it to exist when you're taking it into consideration for finance, because that's the only way we're going to expand the number and the types of stories that we're seeing from people of color. Because we don't want to continue with sort of the tropes that we've seen historically. And so I do think we have some work to do in terms of expanding the types of stories we see.
So, yeah, I wanted to start, if I could just step in for a second. I totally agree with what Rob is saying, and it's sort of like, oh, same story but faces of color instead, and especially this is especially true of like there are these like impact financiers, social impact financiers, who like a certain type of positive story because they don't want to feel guilty about the society that they created. So they're less apt to finance darker stories. I like darker stories, and I have more trouble getting them off the ground because the marketplace, including streamers, by the way, they want positive stories about being a person of color in America. They don't want to hear us complaining. So that's a challenge that we have.
So, I specifically, and I'm going to talk to you, Mynette and Rob, and then Allison, I want to talk to you a little bit about packaging. But how do you, well, Rob specifically, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Can you talk about that? Because that is kind of, it isn't something, it's not a film line that you may see all the time when you talk about, the Black experience, the Black story. So can you talk a little bit about how that was possibly packaged and you know, how that came to fruition. And then Mynette, for you know, some of the stories that you were talking about, the same thing too. And then I want to get a little bit more into, you know, with Allison, because you are, you know, in media finance at, you know, one of the world's biggest agencies. You know, how does all of that come together? And, you know, what are some things people can take away from packaging something so it actually does, you know, get backing?
Well, first of all, that's such a great question. I am not the foremost expert to speak on Ma Rainey, but I do have a familiarity enough to understand how that project in particular rests within the complicated financial structure that we have to deal with. So a well-known IP, right? August Wilson, produced by Denzel Washington, a stellar cast, right? Now, let's just remove that from what we know about it and put it in the world of unknown faces. A well-established IP, right? A-list producer behind it, and a stellar cast. In a normal environment, you're probably talking about, you know, you walk in with that, you get, say, 35 million, right? I'm saying it's faceless, right? Because you have an IP, you have A-list actors, and you have an A-list producer. It's a package that is a no-brainer. That film had to switch studios because it couldn't get the budget that it needed. And it wasn't the number that I mentioned, because the essence of it, I believe, wasn't as familiar of a storyline, right? And so it became a question of, where's the audience for this? Well, you look at the cast. And so, you know, it had to move studios and find someone who believed in what it was. And I think that is not unlike the challenges that are faced with this type of content, because, you know, you would think that package would be a no-brainer, but it faced some challenges.
And Mynette, what about you? And even this latest film that you have coming out on May 21st in theaters, what were some of the challenges you faced?
Sorry, I was gonna try to show the poster. It's on my icon, but it's called "I Carry You With Me." It's a Spanish language feature by a first-time narrative director. Her name is Heidi Ewing. She's very established, Oscar-nominated documentarian. But the movie is about two undocumented immigrants from Mexico who cross the border and find success in New York in the restaurant business. And it's based on her two best friends, Heidi's two best friends. And so she originally set out to make it as a documentary, but then realized that it really needed to be a narrative feature to talk about their backstory in Mexico. So it's kind of a hybrid. I don't like to call it a hybrid, but it's a narrative feature with documentary elements, let's say. And it was challenging for multiple reasons. It was Spanish language, first of all. It's all Mexican cast, so we had no name actors in it. It's a very bold and new format that combines documentary and scripted. And we were shooting mostly in Mexico, which is, you know, a lot of financiers were, you know, very risk averse, you know, so they're like, shooting Mexico, what does that mean? But like I said, luckily we had this champion in Alex Zahn at Sony Worldwide, and, you know, it was a very small budget, but like he pushed it through and just like kept pushing it through, and you know, he started this initiative to greenlight more Latino films, and so this was the first in that initiative. He now works at Netflix, but you know, thankfully he greenlit this before he went to Netflix, because I don't know if Netflix would make this movie, frankly. But you know, luckily we made the movie. We once we had that deal, it was a negative pickup deal. It was easy to find the financing because it's no risk. So we basically just found like a lender, a dequity financier, let's say. And then we made the movie and premiered it at Sundance last year. And it's been postponed the release date's been postponed 5 times. It's finally coming out May 21st in theaters.
Congratulations.
So yeah, but I don't know. I guess I'm a masochist because I love making challenging movies like this. We had no name anyone. But I think the storyline was very zeitgeisty. It's about undocumented immigration, which is a very buzzy topic right now. Yeah.
Definitely. And then Allison, just the overall packaging. Well, talk a little bit about how projects come to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting managing it from inside the agency, because obviously the goal and what we're always trying to do is figure out the best possible way for our clients' films to get made and seen by the right people, right? That's our job, that's our goal. And a lot of times in our group, specifically where we're putting together independent financing, we have projects that we see from script stage and, we help sort of guide our colleagues and put together. We also have projects where our colleagues in the literary and talent departments have put a great package together, and we have the opportunity to sort of jump in and help figure out what the financing and or distribution plan should be. And what we see on the package side is there's a sweet spot, I think, between budget, genre, director, package, and producers, like Rob was describing, that if you hit it all just right, you have this layup film, right? And I think that there was a film earlier this year, and it's a weird one to bring up on this particular group, but Antoine Fuqua and Will Smith are making a film called Emancipation, which landed in a really enormous way. And that's a thriller, and it has a huge director and a huge movie star, and it landed with an enormous deal at a streamer that we were able to negotiate in a really big way, right? But that, and from an incredible screenwriter, it's the package hit every note and landed in a moment, as Minette said, that these were issues that everyone was really talking about, right? And does that package land the same way if some of those elements are different, right? Is the same script and the same story getting the same attention if you don't have, one of 3 actors in that lead role? Right? Probably not. And I think that's what's really tough, is how do you figure out that sort of secret sauce? And is there, an incredible version of a film that can be made for $5 million instead of $25 million, so that you don't have to wait to have exactly the right people in those lead roles to be given the opportunity? But this, it comes to the next question, which is, are those valuations being made fairly?
That's right.
And are they being made equitably across different groups?
That's right.
And it's a question that I don't think, and I'll admit this openly, I don't think I have done enough work to actually look at the data and answer. And I am glad for things, like the McKinsey study that have come out, that have started doing that work for us, that create opportunity to kind of look inward and look back at film sales and say, does this make sense? Right? Why did these foreign sales come back so different on this movie and this movie?
Right. I had an example where we had a project that we were putting together, and we were dealing with a foreign sales entity that specializes in Latin America. And but that company consulted with another company to get some of their estimates. And we threw out the name of one of the world's biggest music stars that could probably sell her reading the phone book. And the response was, there's no value. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, it's a $3.5 million picture. This person gets about $5 million a picture. and she's Latin, And you're telling me she has no value in Latin America? Okay, this conversation's over. So I wonder, it's such a packed, deep conversation to have, right? Because we don't talk about the actual statistics behind it, right? Because as we know, Asia, Latin America, and Africa is the largest populations on the planet, right? So we still have estimates and numbers that I don't know if it's because of discretionary income. Some people have more ability to go to the movies, or why are we still catering not to the world, but to, sort of the minority in this regard, right? So I do think that statistics are not really representative of the movie-going audience. And I don't know why we're not breaking that at the studios. The streamers appear to be doing it. They're looking at, okay, who's watching our stuff? Which is really smart, right? Because, and I use this example all the time, a hardware store owner could care less about half-inch screws. Now, that could be relative, maybe some do. But what they do is they stock them because people come in to buy them. They could care less about double-sided tape, but they have it because people. So why wouldn't you go back and say, who's watching these movies, who's going to the theaters, and invest there, right? It just doesn't make good business sense to me. It's like, regardless of whether I look like you or whether we understand each other, it's good business, right? Because these are the people who are spending money on our content. And I think at the end of the day, which we always face this question, it's a business. How are you serving the business, right? I like your idea, your story's good, but where's the business? What's your exit strategy? Who's the audience? We always get those questions. And so it's curious to me why we don't go back and look at who the audiences are and provide content and invest in those movie-going numbers. So,
well, I think that goes back to what Allison just brought up with the McKinsey study, leaving the 10 billion on the table for the content, and how do you rectify that? How do you move that needle or change that dial so that that content gets recognized and gets the funding? Why would anybody want to leave that much money on the table? You were about to say something too, so.
Okay, I want to jump in here.
No, go.
Well, I think one theme that we use a lot at JuVee, and it's courage, right? Because if you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation and you are managing your budget, it doesn't relate to stockholders that you do a $10 million picture that makes 50 million. That's not moving the needle for them. If you do $100 million that you put 200 million into and it brings back $1 billion, that's something you can report back to your Wall Street call, right? Courage would be saying, wait a minute, if I do 20 of these $10 million films and they're bringing back the positive returns, then I can double down on those returns, win a guarantee, and not risk 200 million, hoping that I get 800 million back, right? So
not to mention one of those films might make 800 million.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. But what that requires, and this is where the courage comes in, what it requires is to do so many numbers of those productions that may not be within your understanding or your wheelhouse to be confident enough to say, I can do 20 of those and do one of these, right? So you feel better putting in the 200 million into one film because you sort of hedged your bets, as opposed to these smaller films which have fairly consistent returns, right? Some bigger than others. And like Allison said, some are huge breakouts. but it's a shift in business strategy, right? And it takes risk to say, here's where I'm investing.
Yeah, and I will say it's an inertia and the lack of familiarity and the fear of doing something new. I mean, it's really hard at these studios to do anything innovative. It's hard, and you really need like out of the box thinkers and champions to say, hey, oh, the Latinx audience is completely, there's money left on the table there. I did in fact have a meeting recently with a studio who was like, we recently thought there's only one studio, Pantaleon, who's catering to the Latinx audience, and we thought we should do that too. I'm like, yeah, you should totally do that. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made there. Latino audiences are like the most frequent moviegoers, and so, but I had to push Sony Classics to hire Latinx publicists for I Carry You With Me, and now I'm bringing up, we're getting ready to release. I'm like, okay, can we do something on TikTok? Because TikTok is like driving up book sales. I'm like, it can drive up ticket sales too. Let's figure out how to use it. And, there's a lack of familiarity with that. There's only 15-year-olds use that. I'm like, no, not only 15-year-olds use that. But it's new. It's you have to wrap your head around it,
Imagining you explaining TikTok to the Sony Classics guys is so good.
It was just, met with silence.
It's so good. And I think there's also such a difference in the risk profile, which is, right, business speak for courage, I suppose, between a studio who actually can take $10 million, $10 million risks and choose not to, versus an independent equity financier who maybe has a total fund of $20 million. And they're trying to pick and choose the 5 films that they're going to invest in this year. And if they don't make a return on that movie, they may just not be able to invest in another movie after that, right? And that is a really, really hard place to break through, because they are, on the one hand, trying to collateralize every last cent that they can, right? Because otherwise they're really putting themselves in a highly leveraged position. Or they're taking big swings, which, might work and might not work. And we're super grateful for them when they do work. But when they don't, those are all the companies that you don't hear about anymore because their fund ran out, right? And the way that most of the sort of traditional independent financing has been done is by collateralizing against tax credits and foreign sales, right? And that's where I think when you talk about the straight indie model, that foreign sales piece is so critical and so important. And I keep thinking back to what you said, Rob, about the numbers that you guys pulled for yourself on different territories. I'm like, can I have them? We should talk about them after this. But it's an algorithm, right? And every sales agent has their own version of it, but it's based on past box office of the elements in the film. So if you have a first-time filmmaker, ding. Right? Like right off the bat, ding. If you have someone who has been in huge box office films, like huge earning films, but they were playing a character who was made famous by IP and not by them, right? Like that might change the algorithm. If you have someone who is a enormous star, even if the script isn't something they're in love with, this may be something you can totally collateralize. And I understand that decision-making process. I respect that that's what it has to be. And I do think that part of what we need to change is how those valuations are calculated on the foreign side. And I don't know, Denise, if I'm stepping on some future conversation topics.
Well, actually, it's a good transition into, and Rob touched on it, and now you touched on a little bit on the foreign sales markets. And, are we seeing a shift in those in those arenas as well? I mean, what are you seeing in those arenas with BIPOC projects?
Well, this is a question I'd actually have for Allison, in that I wonder if, there was mention of a self-fulfilling prophecy in this space, right? But if you're gauging the potential success of a project based on its historical performance,
Mm-hmm.
are you also taking into account the marketing engine behind it? So I may have, because I look at Bohemian Rhapsody, right? Rami Malek. I haven't seen him do $200 million film where he's starring, right? And that film made almost $1 billion.
Mhm.
So, it's not clear to me how it's applied, and I wonder if the effort is being put into examining all of the elements that might have made it historical success that could now affect, this new project, or looking at the performance of someone who may not have had the support behind the marketing engine, and what the ability might be to perform in the future. I don't know, based upon how foreign sales agents approach that process, if it's being considered. What are you?
Yeah. No, it's a really good question. And I mean, we don't run the numbers on our, so it's hard for me to answer because I don't know the answer. Minette, I don't know if you've ever sat down and run numbers like with a foreign sales agent, but we look at the sheet and we question it sometimes. And sometimes you're questioning it because you're saying this actually seems very high for this movie, and you're just trying to win the business, right? Like you're usually questioning it more in that direction.
No,
than the other direction.
It's always too high. I always take the low estimate and cut it in half.
Yeah, exactly. It takes 50% it takes. That's your real collateral. Yeah.
But I have to say, I make pretty small films. I make films usually below $5 million, and they don't usually. I've only had, I think, probably in memory 4 or 5 films that have done some pre-sales. But in almost all the cases, I had to buy back those rights because we ended up selling the world to a streamer or HBO or something. And that's happening, seems to be happening more and more, these kill fees, right? These kill, well, especially during this pandemic when there's like no theatrical at all. So I do think the foreign sales model continues to falter, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, when it enters the conversation, I immediately say, I'm not playing that game, because I feel like one of the things that has improved tremendously in the business is the amount of outlets, financiers. There's so many different avenues that you could go down. I think one of the most important things you could do in this process is find people who are aligned with your ambitions.
Yeah.
And so, because we have spent a tremendous amount of time trying to get a package together that makes sense on the foreign side. And it's not easy because usually all of those actors are already working.
Yeah.
And so, it can eat into the lifespan of your project, right? Because when you're packaging, you don't have all your elements forever. And so, you spend time trying to get a particular actor, you might lose your director, and vice versa in that scenario. So I would offer that, if you have a package that makes sense, then steam forward.
Yeah.
If someone comes back and say there's no foreign value here, if you don't have immediate access to close that loop, then consider your options, because I do think it presents these challenges, right? Because if you go in and say, hey, bring X actor, and that'll increase the numbers, then I can guarantee you that actor knows that they're an element that made the difference because they've been down that road before. Oftentimes that comes with additional requirements. And so now you have restrictions, or you have additional requests to meet in order to move your film forward, whether it be your location, whether it be how you market. But oftentimes that comes with some additional obligations to the process.
And by the way, it's getting even harder to attach cast now. They're all booked up with series, and especially now with this pandemic and the backlog of projects they have to make. So, you know, it's like you attach someone, you're not going to make your movie until 5 years from now. So it is, I mean, that's why I work a lot in this low budget space, because it's like you find the equity financier who believes in the project and can take a swing, you know, even without the biggest star. And, you know, I will say that, you know, my films that have sold the best are the most outside the box. They don't fit in an algorithm. And I think for theatrical feature films, you need that weird, bold film. Like you know, if it's an algorithm, then sell it to a streamer, you know, but if you're making a theatrical movie, just figure out how to shrink that budget, find an equity financier, and just do the thing and sell it for a lot of money at Sundance.
Yeah.
What are, on that note about, you know, equity financiers and, you know, how things are getting funded, are there other ways that, you know, filmmakers can secure financing or leverage financing for project? What are some strategies that they can enlist?
All. Right? Try literally everything, and then when everyone says no, continue to try.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my producing partners on a project is literally like going on Clubhouse every night and like, you know, trying to meet people. And he set up like 3 meetings this week, just based on people he like DM'd on, not Clubhouse, you can't DM, but like he finds them on Instagram afterwards and then sends them a DM. And then we had meetings with them. So it's like literally everywhere.
Yeah, you know, and I've noticed that there's a wave of investors that are willing to invest in packaging so that they can then draw the interest of a larger investor. But you know, what I don't know that we have a consistent avenue, like you know, like the blacklist tells us what scripts are, you know, are hot or popular or should be of interest, right? I don't know if we have you remember they used to have the creative directory, which told you you could get one for distributors, for agents, for production companies. Nothing where you have investors and what their interest of investing in. And oftentimes, of course, this falls for investors into a special purpose vehicle, but there are a lot of parties, I think, out there that specifically want to invest in film space. I don't know that there's a registry for that. And so, you know, it's an idea that somebody could take and run with, but I think that the ability to go and say, hey, because one of the things that I had to do when I was working as an independent was I literally had to research and go through everything. Forbes, New York Times, everything, any magazine, any article I could see about someone with a high net worth, and research them to find out where their passions are. Maybe this is something that would be interesting. So I really had to do a lot of research to find out and compile a list of potential investors. I think that if you're operating independently in that space, it's a must. Whether it's a studio that has a sensibility for your content, whether it's a smaller network, whether it's you know, like CAA, who you know has a packaging, and you got to figure out a way to get to them, but come up with your options, your list of options, and then go through them. And you know, even like Mynette's saying, if it go online, ask questions.
Yeah, well, it's also it's a full-time job. I have a log of hundreds of investors, you know, Google Doc of hundreds of various investors. They come and go. There's new ones come in. I met 2 new ones this week, you know, and and it's really hard to keep track of all of them. But I usually start with like the film festivals. Like I'll go to the Sundance catalog and say, who are the executive producers? Who are the production companies? And that's you kind of start there.
Mynette, I think you have a subscription-based business there. You
You all feel like there are certain studios and streamers, you know, at this time that are more open to BIPOC projects?
I think all are more open than they were last year. and more open last year than the year before that. And hopefully it keeps trending in that direction. I think the streamers obviously have a little bit more room to play in terms of being able to reach an audience and not have to justify a wide theatrical release on every movie. I think we're all pretty familiar with the players who have already for a long time been active in sort of amplifying underrepresented voices, and other, the larger studios are taking note and trying to pay attention to that. I mean, and increasingly in ways that are not, oh, good, okay, so we'll have all the friend and that friend's family be Asian or whatever it is in the movie, right? So
Have you all ever changed a project dramatically in order to get financing? Let's say, your project does have an all Latinx cast, all Black cast, or all, Asian cast. And, maybe you had someone say to you, if you do XYZ, if you add, these 5 white people in or whatever, did you all, compromise a project even in any kind of way so that you would get the money that you need? And has anyone ever suggested that to you in projects that you've brought up? Is that something that's happened?
Were you on my phone call today?
I mean, yes, I have the project that's been on my slate the longest, 12 years, has an Asian lead and a Black lead. And I had great people attached to it. Bradford Young was going to shoot it, and so many people have told us, can you make at least one of the characters white? And we were like, no. Finally, I think we're going to bring it back out now. We're going to dust it off because I think people are open to an Asian and Black lead. But no one ever. I mean, there was another movie that I released recently called Swallow that was a small movie, $1 million movie starring Haley Bennett. And there was an opportunity for us to get some financing if we cast somebody in a role, a significant role. And we, auditioned her, worked with her, and it just did not work. And we were like, we just couldn't bring ourselves to do it. So we were back to the drawing board and looked for financing for another 6 months because we just couldn't creatively compromise like that. So I don't think I ever have. I mean, I make movies, not widgets,
That's right. And, to add to what Mynette is saying, it's a tough argument to make to us because we curate our projects so intently. And so if you're suggesting we change an element, if there is a rationale behind it other than this is what we think, then we can consider it. But to change the project and the makeup of the project for one entity or company or investor, we think that it could be short-sighted. Otherwise, we wouldn't have put the package together the way we did.
I want to get to some of the questions in the chat because there are a lot of questions in the chat and we've probably got about 25 minutes left. So I'll ask some questions and then I'll come back. But one question is specifically for Mynette. It says, did you create the budget here or did you have an LP in Mexico create it?
Yeah, I worked in conjunction with a line producer in Mexico to create the budget. It's a must. Whenever I'd never shot in Mexico before, so whenever you shoot somewhere new, you definitely have to get a local, someone who's worked there before.
Okay, this is another question. It says, can the panel speak to how California's new AB5 law makes it harder for independent filmmaking in the state? I don't know if anybody is familiar with that. I'm not familiar with that law.
Yeah.
Okay. When you speak about a lower budget, what range are you speaking of? Under 15 million, under 5 million micro budget. I think someone talked about making, I think Mynette, you talked about making films on the lower budget side.
I mean, like I said, Swallow was $1 million. Land Ho, another film that I sold to Sony Classics, was $300,000. My first feature that went to Sundance, Children of Invention, was $150,000. And that, by the way, I chose to distribute by myself because it's an Asian American movie that distributors didn't know how to market. So yeah, so that's what I mean when I say low, but there are people who define, 10 million as low.
Okay, this question is this is for Allison, actually. And it has to do with becoming an agent.
Oh. I mean, like, just
how does that process even start?
Like beg, borrow, and steal until they let you do it. Genuinely, I worked as an assistant, and I got in in the mail room at Paradigm, worked my way up through Paradigm, moved from there to CAA, worked as an assistant, worked as a coordinator, went back down to the mailroom upon getting promoted, which is a quirk of the CAA trainee program. And you just keep going and keep believing that you're going to do it. And I couldn't have done it without great mentors and people helping me, Rogue specifically, who was my boss and who promoted me. And yeah, it was getting in to the first mailroom that was hard. The rest of it was do a good job, prove your worth, have a position on things, and honestly, stay through the hard parts, stick it out. That's how I became an agent.
Another question, how can the packaging strategy balance big stars with new stars that need a platform to go to the next level? Anyone? Okay.
I would offer that there's challenges there, right? Because you have to have a big star willing to work with the new stars. So oftentimes it requires that emerging talent to build on their relationship to pull in that big star. Or you have to have a filmmaker that the big star is willing to work with, and that filmmaker, because of their relationship or their familiarity with one another, can vouch for the new stars. But it's a tricky business to get a big star to put their brand in the same space with emerging stars if they have no familiarity. And so I would offer, as a strategy, you have someone on the team with a standing relationship with a big star that they can vouch for. Otherwise, it gets tricky unless you have a tremendous amount of money that you can pay that big star.
So this question is, it kind of goes along the lines of this. And, I'll direct this, any of you can answer this question, but I know Mynette specifically, because your film that's coming out in May to theaters actually has all new actors and not big actors. This person is asking, if you don't have access to big name stars or a well-established IP, how can original projects with BIPOC characters and themes move forward? How do you actually move that forward? I know you talked a little bit about film festivals, and just really just knocking on several doors, but they're asking, what are some practical steps that producers can take? What are some takeaways that you can give them for moving these projects along?
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, it's doing the work. It's hiring the Latinx publicists. It's, figuring out how to use TikTok. It's, and our stars our actors are stars in Mexico. They're not stars in the US. But it's figuring out how to, to use them in the US basically, and market them as breakouts. We also were lucky to get award nominations for our films. So it's like, hopefully people will come to see it because it's good. And the storyline is zeitgeisty. So you just think of whatever elements you can if you don't have the big stars. My director was an Oscar nominee for Jesus Camp. And so she's obviously a big marketable aspect. The innovative storytelling is a marketable aspect, you know, all the pull quotes from the reviews, all that stuff helps. You use anything and everything to try to market the movie, sell tickets.
This is from Samantha. I'm an independent producer in LA trying to put together a Latinx rom-com by a young in his career director. And I keep hearing rom-coms are hard and everyone wants a feel-good rom-com. It's frustrating to hear the market is resistant and the market is hungry in the same breath. Can you talk a little bit about the practicalities of putting a film like this together with a budget under $5 million?
I think there's a desire for rom-coms in the marketplace. I think that you're hearing it from Netflix, certainly, which it's been a refrain from them for a while, though they have a lot of first look deals feeding them the rom-coms that they need. I think Hulu is definitely going to be moving into that space. HBO Max has, you know, proven that that's with some of their first releases on the platform, something they're really interested in. To me, the key, especially if you're talking about a film that's under 5 million, is either, you know, you find, as Mynette pointed out, like that equity investor who will step in and believe in it and give you the money to make it at a really low budget, so you don't have to worry about all of the other stuff until it's done and it's incredible and you can sell it for way more than you made it for. Or you build out a package that makes sense for those kind of streamers. And, you know, that can mean a different thing on a different day, is the honest truth.
But you should take those kinds of statements with a grain of salt. Yeah. You know, rom-coms don't sell, rom-coms do sell. Like it really depends on who you talk to, which executive at which company, on which day, you know, what excuse they feel like telling you, you know, for rejecting you. It's take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and you know, I don't get behind something that you don't believe in. And if you believe in this rom-com, then, you know, every time someone says no, you're closer to the yes. So say thank you. Now I'm closer to my green light because you're out of the way. So, you know, make sure if it's something you believe in, it will find its home.
That's the thing I'll say is that producers, we are speculative, we are proactive, and we are risk takers. Okay, and we see the future. The financiers and studios, they're reactive. You know, and so if we believe it, we're the proselytizers. And so if you believe it, you'll get someone to believe you and finance you.
Question from BD. Are you all using AI analytics in your development for films?
I've been hesitant to engage that. Because I don't think there's anything like having an emotional or psychological interaction with a story that you're reading and can see from the page. And so I'm really hesitant to use AI to determine the value of a script.
This question is from, I think it's Glenna. Have you seen any difference in how COVID-19 has impacted financing for BIPOC projects? Are financiers less likely to take a risk on our projects versus ones with majority white cast producers? I guess during this time period.
Yeah, I mean, to lump all BIPOC projects together is weird to me because, you know, Moonlight is a very different movie than Black Panther, which is very different than Girls Trip. So it's sort of like, you know, it depends on the movie. Ultimately, it depends on like what the story is, what the premise is, and all of that stuff. That stuff matters more than I think, you know, the what race the actors are. So it's hard to answer the monolithic BIPOC question.
I will say during COVID, though, I think that the financing side has just been truly all over the place in a really insane way for reasons largely related to insurance and you know, COVID protocols and the additional costs of being on set, which everybody on this call already knows about, right? I don't think that there's been any funding decisions made based on content as much as based on
COVID.
Yeah, okay, how you can actually get on set.
How can we get this done safely? Are you seeing, or any of you seeing, more pre-sales from European local SVODs now during COVID, as opposed to traditional feature financing?
You mean the local SVOD services trying to pick projects up?
Yes.
That, yeah, I mean, local is booming. Yes.
Local is booming.
I think that
small. The amounts are small, you know,
Mhm.
they're really
Mhm.
small.
Yeah. But we're seeing, like, you know, especially Netflix, who has, you know, local offices across Europe, like, will spend real money on projects that are designed to be local. Definitely the actual local SVOD services that are not the majors, but existed previously in certain markets. I don't know. They're gonna have a tough road. We'll see. Get acquired, or, you know, fight for content and build out their content networks. Assuming that question is coming from someone who's in a, you know, a European space.
Yeah, I've looked
Nordic or something.
No, I've looked at, you know, I've asked this question myself and explored it. So, like, you know, SBS in Australia or a Mubi in Latin America and the UK, like they do pre-buy sometimes, but again, it's like just really small. If you're making $1 million movie, it would help, but other than that, not so much.
This is a question, this has kind of come up a little bit, but I'm going to ask this again. If you have a name cast, but a first-time producer with a first-time director, how do you get in front of a studio's executive to pitch? It's not really about financing, but about pitching per se.
Use the cast, I guess, you know, use the cast to get you in the door.
Yeah, because no matter how phenomenal the filmmaker is, if they don't have the breadth of experience that the talent has, the talent is your calling card. You know, because, you know, it suddenly becomes the talent's movie, right? So let's say if there's an unknown filmmaker, an unknown producer, and then we put Viola on it, right? It then becomes a Viola picture. Mm-hmm. You know, not necessarily within its substantive execution, but to anyone hearing it. You know, it's the first thing they're going to hear, and it's the thing they're going to track with. So oftentimes the talent has to be aware that that's the strategy you're using, because you could get some pushback if you're going around pitching their movie. But, you know, I would offer that you come to that agreement that, you know, we're bringing you in, and a lot of times it's helpful to add them as a producer. It gives them encouragement to even help open doors.
This question is from Jennifer. Says, I want to know how the valuation, I guess once you get the valuation, compared to the green light time period and prep. So I guess the time something is valued to the time that the project, that they say you can go ahead and make this film. What's the time period like, or does it depend on?
It depends. It's gonna be
varies.
Place.
If the question, I think what I'm hearing is from when you say like launch to market, mm-hmm. and, you know, to start pitching the project to when you go. Yeah, I mean, could be 3 months, could be 5 more years. Did it work or not? Right? Like you could be starting next week and your lead falls out. I don't know. Right? So.
This question is from Gretchen. Where do you find financiers? And do you always have to have a script, or can you have a treatment? Do you need a director attached? But the big question is, where do you find the financiers?
I liked Mynette's strategy.
Yeah.
So at the film festivals, look at who the EPs are. Look at who's financed other films.
Yeah. You know, and I would offer that if there's no script, and there's no element of familiarity involved there, get a script. And
Yeah,
then,
if it's not based on, a book or something, an existing IP, then a script is definitely helpful. As far as like whether you need to attach a director or other elements before you bring it to a financier, it depends on the financier. I mean, there are some financiers who want to be involved in the casting and want to be involved in attaching directors. But when you bring it to a producer, it should probably just be the script.
We've got about 8 minutes left, so I want to ask a few more questions, and then I want to, the three of you to kind of leave us, with just any words of wisdom, advice, for those out there that they're really seeking, funding and trying to navigate this space. This project. Okay, so this question says, I have a project I'm prepping for the marketplace here in Ireland. We have a potential interest from a BIPOC star for the female lead. She's already been successful on some streaming service. How can a producer propose this actress if no data exists from sales agents on how they perform in different markets? And I know, I may think, Rob, you touched on this data that you have, on how things are performing in Brazil and, Australia and so on and so forth. So they're asking, what do I do if I don't have any data, basically?
well, there are digital analytics companies that do that specifically this. You give them the name and they can research, how many, what's their social media presence? What have they done before? How many magazine covers have they done? Things like that. It really comes down to, as the producer, you gathering as much supportive information as you can. And, even if it's a photo of them with Will Smith, right? So whatever you can gather to help build the case that this is a person of interest, you should do it. And maybe reach out to someone who does these sort of analytics, parallel to what the streamers do and some studios are starting to do. But find those companies, say, here's my person, what can you tell me about them?
I also think the ubiquity of the streaming star is actually becoming a really important kind of touchstone. You have to pay attention to it. It wouldn't make sense not to, whether you're a foreign sales agent who's used to, running things through a particular model or otherwise. You can't ignore that someone is famous and well known and well liked and has a huge fan base because of, being on a streaming show. And you have to test, does that get people into theaters? People have to be brave about that.
I look at Instagram followers and just general like PR value, which is it's softer. It's not quantifiable, but you can pitch that.
Okay, and this will be our last question. I have a $5 million action thriller with a female Black Latinx lead and a socially relevant subject matter. The villain is a white male, and we're looking to find a known comeback actor. Is there value to using this strategy?
At that price point, I would offer it, yes. There are a number of actors that may not be getting all of the work that they got before, but they still have name value. And if that's an equation that you can put together, I think that could make sense. I mean, there are companies now that have their business model that's steeped in that kind of structure. So sounds like it's a formidable strategy to me.
Sounds like a good project.
That's
It's a really good project. Good.
So first of all, I want to thank all three of you for being here. And I just want to, before we close out in like 5 minutes, if each one of you could just, offer any advice or words of wisdom, for the producers and others, on this webinar tonight that are, in this space of, doing socially conscious, BIPOC projects, features, whatever, and trying to find the money?
Well,
I start? Yeah, do you want to hear this?
you go ahead.
Okay. First, I would start with thank you so much for having me here. And thank you, Rob and Minette, because it's humbling that I would even be on a panel with you guys. So thank you. And to everyone who is here, I think that the most important thing all of us can do going forward to first keep pushing these issues forward, but also to just make our movies, is to actually start forgetting about all of the things that have made sense in the past and that are the ways that we're supposed to be making the movies, and to start just working on things that are the best possible quality, best possible people, and have a business case behind them. I would leave it with that. That's what I'm trying to do in my own work, is stop thinking like the, traditional agent path, right? This is what we do, and in this order, and we set it up and we figure it out, right? I am trying to take a step back from that and say, what's the larger industry look like, and how can I be a meaningful member of my own tribe and the company and the larger creative community? So that's what I got.
Should I go? Yeah. I would offer that strategy is vitally important, right? We've offered some options for financing, but I think it's really vitally important to your process that you determine what your strategy is going to be. Am I going to do this independently? Am I going to try and go through a studio, right? Am I going to get a list of investors and go through that list? Identify a strategy and work that strategy, and anything may happen along the way, but to save your time and maximize your efforts, come up with an effective strategy of where you're going to find the money, and focus on that 100%. What I'm not seeing in my travels is, some of the things that we used to have, like, I know the guys at Hidden Empire, they have a deal with a financier where they can greenlight, right? Of course, Tyler Perry can greenlight things he wants to do, but that person or that entity that can actually greenlight the movie, it still has to go through a process unless you're going through independent financing. Right? There's also a lot of talent in this environment that have deals at places, right? Identifying who those people are who might be sensitive to your content, but come up with a strategy and do everything that you can do. Go to festivals, go to meetings like this, and identify the strategy and work it.
I would just want to add, this is the best piece of advice I ever got at the beginning of my career, is when you're looking for financing, James Schamus, this is advice from James Schamus, is that you should get the financiers to say no, so that you can move on, get out of your limbo, stop wondering whether they're going to come around to finance your movie, and not waste your time with them. And, so yeah, get them to say no so that you can get to the yes faster. And it only takes one yes. You're gonna get a lot of no's, but it only takes one yes to make your movie. So just keep going at it. Don't get discouraged, and just try not to waste too much time with the ones that say no.
Oh, and one last piece of advice. Have a good lawyer.
That is the best piece of advice, yes.
Well, again, thank you, Rob Williams with JuVee Productions, Allison Hironaka with CAA, and Mynette Louie with The Population. We appreciate all of you taking time out of your busy schedules to speak to the PGA this evening. I also want to give a special thanks to John Corser, Linda Evans, Stephanie Dawson, Julie Goldstein, and the PGA. If you'd like to continue the conversation with us, please be sure to reach out on Slack, and keep an eye out on your email for the takeaways from this panel tonight. The next session in this equity series will be diversity in marketing and distribution. That will be April 29th at 5 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Central, and 8 p.m. Eastern. Mark your calendars now. That's April 29th. And we look forward to seeing you all. Thank you and good night.